If you use Copilot every day and you are treating Cowork just like another chat box, you are maybe only getting 20% out of it. I've spent the last few weeks testing Copilot Cowork inside real corporate environments, and the gap between what most people do with it and what it can actually do is quite wide. So in this video, I'll show you 5 abilities that Cowork has that Copilot Chat simply cannot do, including some real case scenarios that you can start implementing as of today. Let me show you. When you open Copilot, you will see now on the left side there is this toggle that on the left side it says chat, which is what you are probably already used to, and if you click on the right side, this will open Cowork. And there are a couple of key differences between both systems that are very important to know. The first difference has to do with the file selection. With chat, you are fully in charge of the inputs. You either upload documents or you pick them from OneDrive, pointing it at exactly what you want it to read. So when a folder has, for example, 20 files, you need to decide which of those 20 files are the ones that matter for the conversation. But with Cowork, Copilot takes that decision for you. You point it at the folder, you describe the outcome that you want, and Cowork will analyze those 20 files and only select those that are relevant for the outcome that you want. The second difference is what happens next. Chat will always hand you the response in the window, which means that everything else that needs to be done is left up to you. You will have to copy the file, format it, download it, save it where it belongs, or whatever is needed. But Cowork instead is able to do all that stretch of work for you from the beginning through completion. And this is exactly what Cowork is. You see, Copilot has a few features that all sound very similar, but they are actually quite different in what they perform best. On one side, you have chat, which is mainly for quick answers or anything that requires going back and forth with Copilot. Then you have agents, like for example, researcher or analyst, and they are for one very specific task that you might repeat many times, and they are able to do that single job really well. And Cowork is more for that messy, multi-step workflow that requires interacting with several apps. So essentially, this is meant for that kind of work where you might need to get some information from Outlook, maybe pull some data from Excel, maybe even cross-reference it with a Teams message and use all that information to get one thing done. Now, because of that, the way you prompt Copilot is also quite different. For example, with chat, you want to use task-first language, where you describe each step in sequence, summarize this document, now pull out the key decisions, now put them in a table, always task by task. The whole point of Cowork is that it's able to plan its own tasks, so what it needs from you is the outcome. And that means that when you prompt it, you need to describe how that outcome looks like. What is the format that you want? Are there any constraints? What does good look like? And then you can let it work out by itself what are the steps to be taken. You can also see it like this. Prompting chat is like giving someone turn-by-turn directions for every street, whereas prompting Cowork is like giving them the address and letting them drive to the actual destination. Let me show you with a practical example that typically would take me 20 minutes of opening different PDFs and putting all that data in an Excel table. I have a folder in OneDrive full of invoices in a PDF format, but also images and all other sort of different formats. And what I can do is prompt the following. Go through the August invoices folder, pull every invoice, and give me one Excel file with the vendor, the amount, and the date. Now, the first thing you will notice is that Cowork is planning here on the right side what are all the steps that it needs to take to achieve that outcome that you asked for. And essentially, you can follow real time what is happening. So for example, in this case, it already accomplished step number 1, so it already found the folder, and now it's trying to extract the invoice details from all the 30 files that it found in that folder. Now, you will also see here on the right side that is referencing something that is called an Excel skill, which essentially you can see as a set of built-in instructions on how Copilot can work with spreadsheets. And this might take in total a few minutes, but what you can see is that once it finishes, it created a new file and it saved it in OneDrive. So essentially what is happening here is that for every new task, Copilot Cowork will always create a folder dedicated only to that session. And you can find that folder by clicking this icon over here. Now, that's one honest limitation that it's worth knowing, especially if you compare it to the Cowork version that you might know from Claude. At this moment, you cannot tell Cowork where to specifically save the file. It will always save it into a dedicated folder for that session. Now, why is it like this? Well, Microsoft. Now, if I go back to the spreadsheet that Copilot created, I realized that in my prompt, I forgot to ask for a total. So I will add the following prompt. Can you modify the file, adding a total row at the bottom, adding all the amounts? And here is where it gets interesting because as you can see, Cowork is flagging that the invoices are in different currencies. So rather than adding everything into one meaningless number, it totals each currency separately, which is a fair point actually, but I would like to have a single euro figure in this case. So what I'll do is add one more prompt into the queue. Could you add an extra cell with the total amount in euros? convert the currencies using the latest May rates. And this will take a while, but now it's done. And what you can see is that it added the totals for each currency and then a grand total in euros like I asked. And you can also trace back through the thinking. So you can see all the websites that it visited to get the exchange rates. And eventually it also tells you what are the exact exchange rates that it used. So you can always modify if you feel you should be using a different one. Now think for a second what just happened here. I only told Cowork what I wanted to get, that Excel file with all the invoices summarized. And it was able to find the folder by itself, read all those PDFs, but also the JPEG images. It was able to extract that data from these different files and consolidate it into an Excel file. And it was even able to identify by itself that the currencies being used were different, so I had to use a different approach. I mean, if you think about it, it's quite crazy how much it advanced compared to what Copilot could do a year ago. And if you think about it, this opens a complete wall of possibilities. Like, let me now show you the exact same principle, but with a complete different use case. I have a folder with 10 HR guideline documents, and I can prompt Copilot something like this. Go through all the HR guidelines in the folder and give me back a single clean onboarding guide in PowerPoint that I can share with any new hire, including links to the actual source file where more details are needed. And this will take a while, but eventually it creates this PowerPoint exactly with the information that I asked. You can see here what's included in the guide, right? How to grow your career, how to manage time, money, and well-being. And what I really like is that it really did what I asked. So for example, for communication norms, it cited at the bottom where is the source. So actually I could just click this link and find the exact full document. I'm not going to do it in this case, but this just shows the potential that this would have. And of course, if you want, you could continue working out in this session and you could prompt something like, now take this onboarding guide we just built and update it to follow our brand guidelines in such PDF, and apply the color palette, the type rules, and the slide template patterns from the guidelines document, and save the updated deck as a new file. And Copilot will go find the brand guidelines if they exist and update the entire deck with the new style. So this is ability number one. You ask Copilot for an outcome and it will find the exact files and create a new file delivering on that outcome in OneDrive, and you can keep iterating on that same file if needed. Now that you have seen what it can do, let's get Cowork set up properly, because there's about 3 things that make people think that Cowork is not giving good results when actually it's just configuration. And quick one before we set everything up, I've packed these 3 steps, a fill-in form template, and every single prompt of this video in a free 1-pager quick start guide, link below in the description. Alright, so the first thing is finding it, and you can see again the toggle here at the top of Copilot next to chat. And if you cannot see it at all, that usually means that somebody in your IT department needs to turn it on, because Cowork is now available for everybody, but it's being built by usage, which means that somebody in your organization will have to enable it along with the billing behind it. So second thing is the model, right? So here on the top left side, you will see that you can choose which model you want to run. And if you click, you will see the option to switch between Claude Sonnet or Opus, which are both Claude models running under the hood. But there's also GPT 5.5, which is the OpenAI model. And of course, I expect this will get updated all the time, but the location should be roughly the same. And if you don't know which model to choose, the rule of thumb is quite simple. For most of the basic tasks, Sonnet is the right call because it's faster and is able to handle the majority of examples I'll show you today. And it's also cheaper to run, which your company will appreciate. And if your task is longer, it involves a lot of files, or the output is really going to someone important, you might want to switch to Opus. It's more costly to operate, but typically the output is much better. And of course, if you prefer the OpenAI models, that's where you might go with the GPT 5.5. You will see how you can get a feel for it quite quickly. Personally, I like more the Claude models, so that's the ones I use, but it's up to you to decide which one you prefer. Now, the third one, and this one confuses a few people, is that Cowork works with your OneDrive and SharePoint files and not anything that is sitting on your desktop. So anything you want it to touch needs to live either on OneDrive or on SharePoint. Now, moving on, the second ability is being able to create and follow a multi-step workflow that you can steer. Now, let's say, for example, that every Friday you build a leadership brief from 5 team updates that come from SharePoint, Outlook, and also Teams messages. In chat, you would need a prompt for every step. Summarize these 5 files. Now pull the decisions, now combine them, now export them, and re-upload as you go. But with Cowork, again, you hand it the whole outcome at once. For example, take this week's 5 team updates in the Leadership Update SharePoint folder, plus any related emails and Teams messages from this week. Build me a leadership brief under 300 words with 3 highlights and 3 lowlights using plain language, and flag anything that looks like a risk at the top. Cowork is thinking for a while and it comes back with its plan first. It just shows you which files it will use and what it will pull from each. And here you can see that right now it's facing a roadblock because two of the reports are giving complete different figures for the same project. And the nice thing is that Cowork is stopping and asking you what to do. So here I will give it some direction by picking this one, and from here it will just carry on. And to me, the fact that it's stopping and asking you for direction is the line that separates just a tool that does another task and a tool that feels like a colleague you want to work with. Alright, so this took a while, but now I have a finished brief. And in chat, this would be the end of the road, right? So everything else I have is purely administration. Copy the outcome into a Word file, save it as a PDF, load it into an email, draft the email, send it to my stakeholders, take the same document to a Teams message, send it to my manager, and so on. Now, Cowork can do all of that in just one instruction. Check out this prompt. Take the brief, save it as a PDF, draft an email to my stakeholders with it attached, and draft a Teams message to my manager saying the brief is ready with a link. Show me everything before you send anything. And this, of course, will take a few minutes. I'm going to accelerate it, but now you can see it's done everything, and you can see all documents are lined up. It already created the PDF, which is stored in the OneDrive. It already created the draft email, as it says, and that I can double check. So, for example, if I open Outlook and I go into my draft folders, indeed, you can see it created already the draft email with the attachment in place. So essentially, if I would like it as it is, I could just click send and ship. And it says it also drafted the Teams message. But again, nothing has been sent. It stopped before sending it, just as I asked. And that's a cool thing, right? So if you add, hey, show me everything before you send anything, it does a lot of the quiet work. Because the thing with these AI tools is that you never fully know what kind of output it's going to give. So especially for critical elements like this, you want to make sure that first it shows you where it is. And only when you approve it, it continues and send it, or you just send it yourself manually because as you have seen, it's already in the draft folder, so it doesn't take me anything to just click send. Now at this point, Cowork has already done for you something very useful, but you still have to bring quite some manual input and course correct when needed. And if you would be running this in chat, essentially it would mean that next week you would have to do the exact same thing again, use the same prompt, steer again, maybe it will go in the same direction, maybe not, and essentially every single Friday you are stuck into the same workflow. But one of the advantages of Cowork is that it can capture one of the processes that you have already run and package it into a reusable skill that you can use at any time. And it's very simple. You can just use a prompt like this one. Turn everything we just did into a reusable skill I can run again. And this will take a while, but eventually Copilot is saving that whole workflow. So all the steps we've done, meaning gathering the updates, writing the brief, saving the PDF, drafting the email, drafting the Teams messages, it's packing everything into a skill that I can call back later at any time. So then next Friday, I would just go to Cowork and prompt something like run the weekly brief skill. And as you can see, before writing the name of the skill, I used a slash. So in that way, you can point to the exact skill. That's how it works for Cowork. But honestly, even if I would not use that, Cowork is smart enough to find itself which kind of skill you mean and load it without me being so explicit about loading that particular skill. So basically those 15 to 20 minutes that I spent earlier setting up the task and steering a bit the direction of Cowork, it's all now capturing this skill that I can execute in just one single prompt, which is really amazing. If you think about it, this is really the moment that Copilot stops feeling like a chatbot and really feels like a colleague to whom you can teach the process once, and then in the future, it already knows how to execute that workflow again. Now, you might also wonder where can you find that skill later on, and this actually lives here on the left side in the Customize tab, and what you can see is that if you click on it, there's the skill that we just built. And it's also good to know that in total, you can have 50 of your own skills next to the skills that Copilot already offers by default, like that Excel skill we've seen before, or the PowerPoint skill, or a few other ones. And this is also the tab where you would go if you want to rename the skill, or you want to tweak some of the things it does, or you would just want to delete it. And what you see here on the left side is that next to the skills, there's a second tab called plugins, which is also worth taking a quick look because plugins are essentially how Cowork can connect to other tools, like for example, Canva or Box or your CRM, and it actually can use them inside a task. So you can just switch on the ones you want, and from there onwards, Cowork can pull them in anytime that is needed and interact with them in the same way that it was working before with Excel and Teams. Now, going back to that weekly brief I've just created, there's still one step I can take to bring this one level further and make sure that I don't need to think about this any other Friday at all. Because the skill we created is great, but it still needs me to remember every Friday, show up, put that prompt, and let it run. done. But what if I wouldn't need to do anything of that? Because going back to the analogy of Cowork feeling like an actual colleague I can trust, if this would be a real colleague I can trust, I wouldn't have to chase him every Friday and remind him to run the workflow. He would remember by himself. And Cowork can also do that. Let me show you. So essentially, you can click over here on this left side that it says schedule. And then you click here on the top right where it says create. And this will trigger a new conversation in Copilot that will guide you into how to create your first schedule prompt. Now, first, as you can see, usually it will start asking you a few questions on how to tailor the task for you. But in my case, because I already know exactly what I want to do, I will skip these questions and just prompt directly what is it that I want. So in this case, for example, you could use a prompt like this one. Every Friday at 4 p.m., run the weekly brief skill. Then send me a Teams message saying it's ready to review. And as you can see, it's also thinking for a while, but eventually it will create that schedule for you. And you can review what it created, and maybe all of a sudden you want a different timing, then you could suggest instead of 4 p.m. to do it at 5 p.m., right? So you can always review and change. And now every Friday at 4 p.m. it will run. And as you can see, actually Copilot is warning me that the original skill is not sending anything without my approval, but in this case, I actually scheduled it. So that means that it will send something even without me checking it, unless I explicitly tell it that I want to check myself first. Now, personally, I'm still not at the level where I trust Copilot or Cowork in this case to do all these tasks on its own, especially if it involves stakeholder management and sending emails or Teams messages automatically. But if there are some recurring tasks that you're doing every Friday, like for example, something similar to the first example I've shown, where you would just go every Friday into an invoice folder and like go one by one and put all the input into an Excel file, and that Excel file is eventually just for you and you don't send it to anybody, that is something that you could totally automate. And then here you could totally trust Cowork to do it because it's not sending anything, there is no stakeholders involved, and essentially you could schedule it to run every single Friday at 5 p.m. and then every end of the week you have your Excel file in the way you like. So these are the kind of tasks in which you might want to use a schedule prompt. So as you have seen, with these 5 abilities, Cowork now can gather your input, run the multi-step workflow while you are steering it, take real actions across your apps with, of course, your approval, learn your process as a new skill, and run the whole thing again on schedule. None of these things is something that chat can do. And the shift underneath is the same one that I explained before. You want to start by describing your outcome and not the task to follow. And just doing that already unlocks 80% of what Cowork can do for you. Now, you have just seen Cowork taking off an entire Friday ritual off my plate. But Cowork is only half of the story, because there's other type of work that is not made for, like for learning, researching, or brainstorming over a set of files that will not change over time. So if Cowork is the only tool you know, half of your week will remain the exact same way. But big part of that other half can be improved with Copilot notebooks. And in this video over here, I listed my top 4 workflows to help you cut your workload in half. I'll see you over there. Bye.